Welcome to Capitol Catch-Up, the podcast that brings you a clear look at what's happening on Capitol Hill. I'm Victor.
And I'm Lainey. Today we're unpacking a packed docket of legislation, a slew of nominations, and a couple of recent congressional records. Let's start with the bills that have been moving through the Senate.
First up is Senate Bill 925, the Credit for Caring Act of 2025. This proposal would create a tax credit of up to $5,000 for working family caregivers who spend more than $2,000 on qualified expenses for a loved one with long-term care needs. To qualify, a caregiver must have earned income above $7,500 and be caring for a certified individual. The credit phases out as adjusted gross income rises, and claimants would need to provide documentation and identification. If enacted, it could ease the financial strain on millions of Americans who are balancing work and caregiving responsibilities.
That could be a game changer for families who often have to choose between a paycheck and caring for a parent or spouse. It also sends a signal that Congress sees caregiving as a vital part of the economy, not just a private burden.
Next, Senate Bill 567 seeks to award a Congressional Gold Medal to the First Rhode Island Regiment. This regiment was one of the first integrated units in the Revolutionary War, fighting bravely at the Battle of Rhode Island. The medal would be displayed at the Rhode Island State Library, and bronze duplicates could be sold to offset costs. It's a symbolic gesture, but one that highlights an often overlooked piece of our nation's early history.
Recognizing that regiment also reminds us how diverse the fight for independence was, even if the story isn't always front and center in textbooks.
Moving on, Senate Bill 463, the Protect Our Letter Carriers Act of 2025, authorizes $1.4 billion a year from 2025 through 2029 to upgrade postal collection boxes and replace old mail keys with electronic versions. It also directs the Attorney General to appoint a coordinator in each judicial district to oversee investigations and prosecutions of crimes against postal employees, and it asks the Sentencing Commission to treat assaults on postal workers similarly to assaults on law enforcement officers. The goal is to make the Postal Service safer for the men and women who deliver our mail every day.
Violence against postal workers has been a growing concern, especially after a few high-profile incidents. Strengthening security and ensuring harsher penalties could deter future attacks and protect a critical piece of our infrastructure.
Senate Bill 864, the Help Insure Lower Patient Copays Act, would amend the Public Health Service Act to let financial assistance from nonprofit groups and drug manufacturers count toward a patient's out-of-pocket costs. It also makes conforming changes to the Affordable Care Act and the Internal Revenue Code. The changes would apply to plan years beginning on or after January 1, 2026, potentially lowering the cost burden for people with high deductibles and copays.
That could be especially helpful for low-income families and those with chronic conditions who often face steep out-of-pocket expenses. By expanding what counts as assistance, the bill aims to make health coverage more affordable.
Senate Bill 942, known as the Resident Education Deferred Interest Act, or the REDI Act, would amend the Higher Education Act to give medical and dental interns and residents an interest-free deferment on their federal student loans. Borrowers in those training programs could suspend payments and avoid interest accrual while they focus on their residencies.
The cost of medical education is already huge, and adding interest during those crucial training years can be a heavy load. An interest-free deferment could let new doctors and dentists concentrate on learning rather than worrying about mounting debt.
Senate Bill 1572, the Federal Carjacking Enforcement Act, seeks to clarify the federal carjacking statute. It makes clear that knowingly taking a motor vehicle counts as carjacking, even without intent to cause harm, and it limits the death-resulting carjacking provision to cases where the vehicle was taken with intent to cause harm. The aim is to tighten the law and improve prosecutorial clarity.
By sharpening the definition, prosecutors can more effectively pursue carjacking cases, and it sends a message that taking a vehicle is a serious federal crime, regardless of the perpetrator's motive.
Senate Bill 2014, the Special District Fairness and Accessibility Act, would require the Director of the Office of Management and Budget to issue guidance to federal agencies on recognizing special districts as local governments for the purpose of federal financial assistance. The guidance would need to be implemented within a year, helping these districts, often responsible for water, sewage, or transportation services, gain fair access to federal grants.
Special districts are sometimes left out of funding formulas because they aren't classified as municipalities. This bill could level the playing field and ensure essential services in many communities receive needed support.
Senate Bill 1839, the Generating Retirement Ownership Through Long-Term Holding Act, would let individuals defer recognition of reinvested capital gains distributions from regulated investment companies. In practice, investors wouldn't owe tax on those gains until they sell or redeem the shares, or upon death. The bill aims to encourage long-term investing and simplify tax reporting.
That could be a boon for retirement savers who prefer to let their investments compound without the drag of annual capital gains taxes on reinvested dividends.
Senate Bill 1879, the Ban Congressional Stock Trading Act, would require members of Congress, their spouses, and dependent children to place certain assets into qualified blind trusts within 120 days of taking office. It also adds reporting requirements and authorizes civil penalties for noncompliance. The goal is to reduce conflicts of interest and restore public trust in the legislative branch.
Transparency in financial holdings has been a hot topic, especially after a few high-profile stock trades raised eyebrows. Blind trusts could help ensure lawmakers aren't making decisions that benefit their personal portfolios.
Turning to appropriations, Senate Bill 2465 provides funding for the Departments of Transportation and Housing and Urban Development for the fiscal year ending September 30, 2026. It earmarks $250 million for a local and regional project assistance grant program, $60 million for cybersecurity initiatives, and $34.3 million for transportation planning, research, and development. It also authorizes the Secretary of Transportation to issue direct loans and loan guarantees for railroad rehabilitation.
Those funds aim to modernize our infrastructure, protect it from cyber threats, and keep our rail network in good shape. Critical components for a resilient economy.
Senate Bill 2256 appropriates money for the Department of Agriculture, Rural Development, the Food and Drug Administration, and related agencies for the same fiscal year. Highlights include $1.83 billion for the Agricultural Research Service, $1.09 billion for the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, and $561.7 million for extension activities. The bill also supports the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service and emphasizes indigenous food sovereignty and health services for American Indian communities.
That investment in research and extension could boost crop yields, improve food safety, and help rural economies stay competitive.
Senate Bill 2257 funds the legislative branch itself. It allocates $314 million for Senate salaries, $222 million for Senate inquiries and investigations, and $645 million for senators, official personnel, and office expense accounts. It also funds joint committees, the Capitol Police, the Office of Congressional Workplace Rights, and the Congressional Budget Office. Unused funds in the personnel accounts must be directed toward deficit reduction.
Keeping the legislative branch funded is essential for oversight, lawmaking, and the day-to-day operations that keep Congress running.
Senate Bill 3062, the Guidelines for User Age Verification and Responsible Dialogue Act, often called the GUARD Act, targets artificial intelligence chatbots. It would require age verification mechanisms, clear disclosures that the user is interacting with a non-human entity, and would prohibit minors from accessing AI companions. Violations could trigger fines and civil penalties. The intent is to protect children from potentially harmful content or manipulation.
As AI becomes more embedded in everyday life, safeguards for younger users are increasingly important. This bill tries to set a baseline for responsible AI deployment.
Senate Bill 3304, the Medical Foods and Formulas Access Act of 2025, would require Medicare, Medicaid, and the Children's Health Insurance Program to cover medically necessary foods, vitamins, and individual amino acids for people with digestive and inherited metabolic disorders. It also encourages private insurers to follow suit and prevents states from providing less coverage than the federal baseline.
For families dealing with rare metabolic conditions, access to specialized nutrition can be a matter of life or death. This legislation would help ensure those essential products are affordable and accessible.
Finally, Senate Bill 3917, known as the Delilah Law, would prohibit the issuance of commercial driver's licenses to anyone who is not a U.S. citizen, lawful permanent resident, or holder of certain work visas. It also ties compliance to federal highway funding, meaning states that don't enforce the rule could lose money. The goal is to enhance road safety and verify the legal status and language proficiency of commercial drivers.
That proposal has sparked debate about immigration policy and workforce needs in the trucking industry, but supporters argue it's a necessary step for national security and safety.
Let's shift to the nominations that have been confirmed or are pending. First, Robert Sakata of Florida has been nominated to be Director of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, succeeding Stephen Dettelbach. The ATF's leadership will be crucial as the agency tackles gun violence and illegal trafficking.
Kevin Warsh of Florida has 2 nominations, one to be chairman of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, and another to be a member of the board for a 14-year term starting February 1, 2026. His experience in finance will shape monetary policy and the nation's economic outlook.
In the judiciary, Arthur Roberts Jones of Texas has been nominated to the United States District Court for the Southern District of Texas, filling the seat of Ricardo H. Hinojosa. Michael J. Hendershot of Ohio is nominated to the Northern District of Ohio, succeeding Patricia A. Goffin. Jeffrey T. Kuntz of Florida has been nominated to the Southern District of Florida, and John George Edward Mark of Texas is also nominated to the Southern District of Texas, filling the vacancy left by Michaela Alvarez.
Those appointments will affect the federal courts, composition, and could influence rulings on a wide range of issues, from civil rights to environmental regulation.
Frank Garcia of Virginia has been nominated to the Board of Directors of the African Development Foundation, a role that supports private sector development in Africa. George Holding of North Carolina is nominated to be United States Director of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, a position that oversees U.S. interests in that multilateral bank.
We also have diplomatic nominations. Juan Rodriguez of Florida has been nominated as ambassador to Guatemala, and William Trackman of Colorado as ambassador to Tanzania. These posts are key for U.S. foreign policy in Central America and East Africa, respectively.
The Congressional Daily Records give us a snapshot of recent floor activity. On April 29, 2026, the House convened with Speaker pro tempore Mike Herodopoulos presiding. The session featured recognitions of a high school basketball team, a family farm, a railroad safety council, an affordable housing nonprofit, and a church. Debates included the Farm Food and National Security Act of 2026, the Parental Rights over the Education and Care of Their Kids Act, and the Fallen Service Members Religious Heritage Restoration Act. The House also considered the fiscal year 2026 budget and several nominations.
The following day, April 28, 2026, the House and Senate held a joint meeting for an address by King Charles III of the United Kingdom. The King highlighted the historic alliance between the United States and the United Kingdom, emphasizing shared democratic values and the need to confront modern challenges such as terrorism and climate change. His remarks were well received by members of Congress.
That joint session underscores the diplomatic importance of the transatlantic partnership and the ceremonial role Congress can play in welcoming foreign dignitaries.
To sum up, we've covered a wide array of legislation, from tax credits for caregivers and healthcare cost assistance to security for postal workers, AI safeguards, and infrastructure funding. We've also discussed nominations that will shape the ATF, the Federal Reserve, the federal judiciary, development agencies, and U.S. diplomatic posts. And we've highlighted recent House proceedings, including a historic address by the British monarch.
Listeners should keep an eye on the progress of the Credit for Caring Act, the Protect Our Letter Carriers Act, the GUARD Act, and the Ban Congressional Stock Trading Act, as they each have direct implications for everyday Americans. The appropriations bills will also be critical as they fund the nation's infrastructure, agriculture, and the legislative branch itself. Finally, the confirmation hearings for the ATF Director, Federal Reserve Chair, and the new federal judges will be worth watching for their policy impact.
That's all for today's Capitol Catch-Up. Thanks for joining us, and be sure to tune in next time for more in-depth analysis of what's happening on Capitol Hill.